want to talk about ego. Why ego? Well, actually, it's very important. When you begin to think about ego and the implications of ego, it impacts us all in virtually every level of being. So we're going to think about this. Now, I ask you, is ego good? I've gone through life, and particularly in my religious studies, where it was literally beaten into your thought process that, ego is bad. Well, but then again, we're born with an ego. I mean, as we all have a soul. So does the ego override the soul? Does the soul override the ego? I don't know. Because as negative as you can say that ego could be, yet it is the balance of what you would say would be more of the more beneficial attributes to one's personality, correct? So, Buddha, he said that you have to remove I from your thought process first. I don't think that can be done. Personally, at least, I don't know, in this current plane that we're in. And then he went on to say that then remove want, the desire, and now you're left with happiness. I don't know, maybe. But so does that mean that if I love myself, that I'm a narcissist? An egotistic person? I don't know. Because the quandary is that if you don't love yourself, how can you love someone else? And then it gets back to says, well, if you're so in love with yourself, how would you have any capacity to love anyone else? I don't know. I mean, the more I think about this, the more confused I get. It doesn't make sense. So, the question for this program, and the one that you should really give serious thought to, is this. Does God have an ego? Now, don't be so quick to answer this. Stop and really think about this. Does the God that you worship have an ego? You have to answer this question. That's been the problem with the religions of the world. They give us these constructs of a life that virtually is impossible for any human to live, and then they set a standard that contradicts itself. And so you're in this quandary all of your life trying to walk this tightrope, afraid that you're going to be tilting anyone else, and boom, it's over with, right? It's just nuts. I mean, this is my impression of God growing up. He ruled the world. God. Now, could you say that God is the author of ego? I don't think that you would be wrong in that. But it begs the question again, does God have an ego? All evidence would suggest that this God, the God of the Bible, does have an ego. Well, so in order for us to really examine that, and if that is the case, in which it is written, so then that leads us to this next point. Then all humans need to be very concerned, as we've already learned. How many of our species, ladies and gentlemen, have been slayed by the command of these gods? The God of the Christian Bible and the Hebrew Bible clearly is into genocide. Now, that may offend you, But it offends me that when I see a deity commanding humans to go and slaughter other humans merely because they didn't agree with the way that you worship. And throughout history, it has been replete that these gods have demanded that we kill each other to satisfy their ego. But having said that, what is ego? What does it mean? Now, we all have a general idea of what ego is. This, you could say, that under R. Wayne Steiger, ego is talking. I don't know. I think it's more of my soul expressing itself, but hey, so let's take a moment here and just really get into the literal definition of ego. Now, we'll start with this by asking, is ego good or is it bad? So, the noun states under Webster's dictionary, a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. Okay? The synonyms on that would be, right, self-esteem, self-importance, self-worth, self-respect, self-image, self-confidence. Now, the psychoanalysis is the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. So you have to have ego in order to have your own sense of identity. Now, in philosophy, it stands for the conscious thinking subject. Whoa! Ponder that one. But we're not done. The I or self of any person. A person as thinking, feeling, and willing, and distinguishing itself from the selves of others and from objects of its thought. There you go, folks. I am God. Woo! All right, let's get back to here in the psychoanalysis part. The part of the psychic apparatus that experiences and reacts to the outside world and thus mediates between the primitive drives of the ID and the demands of the social and physical environment. Wow. And of course, egotism, conceit, self-importance. Well, there we have it. So that's the definition of ego, right? Now, it is recorded throughout the Bible, and it says that this God says, I am that I am. Well, we got a real problem right there, because if it's I, that's ego. He goes on to describe himself as, I am a jealous God, I am a vengeful God, God sought to kill Moses, I am wrath, I am judgment. There's a lot of I ams in there. And it's always confused me. It doesn't confuse me. It's confounded me why this God sought to murder. Folks, I'm not making this up. And for nearly 42 years, I read those scriptures and always asked myself inside, why was God a murderer? Why did he create something merely to destroy it? And don't give me this crap that it's free will. That is just a mind game. When you talk about free will, we could really get into that. In fact, we will. Not here, though. So ego is I. We've established that. Why would a God, any God, need an ego? Seriously. Ask yourself that. Why would this explain why this God demands he must be worshipped? You shall worship no other gods but me. In order to fulfill its ego? Because that's the only thing it could be, ladies and gentlemen, is to fulfill this deity's ego. Now that just scares the crap out of me, because an ego is unstable, unpredictable. You get it? We all know this to be true, but we fail to assign it to these gods that demand that we worship them. Would not a supreme God not need to be worshiped? Seriously. If you had and were a God devoid of ego, because you would have to be, why would you create something and demand that it worship you? But here on earth, it is either you worship or you're cast away into a hell. Is that not true? I don't care what your religious background is. Whether you're a Buddhist, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Christian, it doesn't matter. All of these gods have an ego. And why must humanity suffer under the weight of these gods by worshiping them? They've given us no cause to worship them. And again, they all appear to have egos. And that's a problem, folks, because that means they're just like us. They may have a higher sense of intelligence. They may have a higher degree of knowledge. They may have ascended to a higher plane of existence. But hear me out on this. They are not the real God. Because the real God, no matter how you want to debate this subject, would be devoid of ego. He wouldn't need it. He wouldn't identify himself to a gender. And to come back on this crazy warped idea that, well, he's a loving God, that depends on which side of the love you're on. Because no matter how you see it, it is an absolute, I don't know. There's many words I could say this, but for our species to be subjected to the whims of these deities, and then to have the gall and the audacity to try to embed into us this fear of death, folks, we're waking up. And it's time for you to wake up. Let me know your comments. It's time, folks, for us as a species to unite together. Quit the killing. We don't have to serve these gods. Never had to. In fact, my challenge is to any god, manifest yourself before the world. That way we don't have to play all these mind games. Again, folks, it's time for the human species to awake out of our slumber. All right, good people, be kind to one another. The first step. We'll talk soon.